This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you love underground music and movies, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed shirts, vinyl, CDs, and more. Go to portlanddistro.com. This episode is dedicated to the memory of Kirsten Halfkenny. Those of you out there who knew Kirsten will know and understand how much he truly meant to me. I just wanted to take some time and express that feeling and sentiment. It's been really hard, and doing the podcast and staying busy is one of the things that's going to help get me through this, and I'd like to thank everyone for your continued support and for listening. These next few episodes were recorded a few weeks ago. I'm going to take a little bit of a break, but I'll be back, regrouped and ready to go. Good day, Ralph. How are you?
I'm tired, but feeling excellent because yesterday Ulfa played its first show in 21 months. Yeah.
Wow. How did that go? Was it awesome?
Dude, it's still hard to fathom. I mean, we played the first two Ropes of Night shows 2 weeks ago, and that was already crazy because it was one of the first indoor events without masks, and people were like scared at the beginning, but then like after a while they got more comfortable, and like really like while playing you could see the people start smiling, dancing, and enjoying themselves. And yesterday we played in Nijmegen in the Netherlands, which is like 2 hours away from Cologne. And it's at Don Rosia, which is one of the best venues I've ever played. And it was, oddly enough, the last night where you had to be seated in like at a concert. So like if we would have played today, it would have been like 400 people and like no seats. And yesterday was 110 tickets sold, but with seats. But the room is incredibly dark. So we could, like the advantage of just using our red lights and the fog really came into play. And dude, it was intense. Like beforehand, like all of us were tense because we haven't played in so long. And yeah. I mean, we were at the brink of breaking up in 2019. I was about to end that band because I didn't know like if I can continue it. But then amidst the pandemic, like all these people showed us so much love and made me rethink things. We talked everything over and we decided to go on. And then we played yesterday and people went apeshit. And like we had to play an encore. I made a little like I said something beforehand. People after the show came out, like just came over and like, is it okay if I hug you? I really want to hug you because your music means so much to me and what you said and like the cathartic element of this show. And people were actually like crying and like hugging.
Oh, wow.
It was, dude. This band, like, I don't know, man. It's just like we created something truly special, I think, and people really connect with it on this emotional level, that which is the undercurrent of that music. That's where I write it from. And yesterday, like, also, I was teary-eyed at some point because I just saw how much this band and my music means to people. So I'm shit tired because, like, it was late. We drove home and loaded out. I was in bed at 3:30 in the morning. But like I'm feeling great today, man. It was a great feeling playing again.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. That's really powerful, and that's awesome.
Yeah, man. And it's just like I was thinking about like yesterday when I was sitting backstage after the show. I was like, damn, man. I really wish at some point Mike could see like this band play. So like we have to really think about doing like this Tombs thing happen here. Or like us getting over at some point, like it's just like I want to see you play see me play with this band because you haven't seen us live yet. Yeah,
I know, man, and I love the music so much, man, and hey, we got to make it happen in 2022, even if it's you know just more of like a working vacation or something like that, where we all go over and just do a few dates and not a proper tour or something. But somehow it's got to happen. I agree with you on that.
We will bring back Unholy Passion Fest next year. So there will be like I think by the time this podcast airs, there will be an announcement. We will have like a small one with us just like Ulfa and Sun Worship, like our best friends. But we want to do a real big one with 4 bands next year in the fall. So maybe we can finally get you there, because I think that would be a great fest for you to play. Yeah.
And I think by the fall of 2022, we're going to be in a different place for sure, man. So I, really want to make that happen for sure. And I'll make that'll be a priority for us if once we start planning this out.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it. Apart from this podcast, we'll work on it and bring you guys over, and hell, we'll make it happen.
That's awesome, man. I would love that. It's been too long, man. It's been too long.
Dude, it's way too long, yeah. But how are you doing so far, Mike?
Well, the last few weeks have been very challenging for me, as you know, and I won't go into too much detail about that. But let's just say I'll liken my experiences to if you have two people that have been in each other's lives for 11 years and they both stabbed each other with a knife, and it took a year and a half for that knife to be withdrawn. That's essentially how I've been feeling in the last few weeks. So, that's it is what it is. I'm a professional. I get, this is what I do. I get through things like this. And so I don't know. It's been good overall. Last night I went to the Dead Guy Killing Music premiere down in Philadelphia, and that was, I mean, the documentary was cool, and I got to, I saw Keith. I think I told everyone on the episode I did with him that I was going to be going down, so it's not a surprise to hear that I made it to the show. And it was just so good to just be out on the road again. I mean, Philly's only like an hour from here, so the drive was relatively short, but it was like just to be out on the highway, and at night, doing something that involved music I love, and then seeing people, friends. I saw Albert from Decibel, and Mike Wahlberg was there, who I don't know why I was surprised to see him, because this is exactly the kind of thing he should be at. And I saw Keith in person. I saw Andrew Gormley and my buddy Robin, who has toured with Anodyne many times. He was like our roadie back in the day, and he's also the proprietor of Portland Distro, who's our sponsor. And
oh man,
yeah,
cool.
And just just being around people, and just people that recognize me from the band and stuff like that. It was good. It was a positive experience overall. Felt great to be out.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And tonight you're going to see Dead Guy play, and Napalm Death, and fucking Blood Incantation. Yeah.
Yes. This is my first weekend that is like a normal weekend, and actually, for the next 2 months, I'm doing stuff like that would normally just be part of my life, and now are these like special events. So today is the Decibel Metal and Beer Fest, and prior to that, there's like a get together with Season of Mist in the afternoon, and so I'll see all people from Season of Mist in the States that I'm friends with, and me and my bass player and some other people are getting together, going to the show tonight, and it's just going to be good, man. It's just going to be positive, good release, after all this time just spending by myself. It's been good.
Yeah, that's great, man. I mean, that's the feeling that I got from the Ropes shows and also the Ultra show now. Like people really embracing that it's like getting back in a way to a new normal, but like you don't have to be shit scared all the time. And I mean, there's still too many idiots that still don't want to get vaccinated or act like complete assholes. But you have these small, secure spaces like these shows, and I'm sure you will have a blast tonight. The lineup is killer, and I mean, there's I already know a bunch of people that I know are there, but you'll probably know even more. So it will be a good hang, I guess. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Dave Whitty, he'll be there. Municipal Waste is playing.
Oh right, yeah.
Dave's I haven't seen him, and I don't even know the last time I saw Dave, but we've been texting, and yeah, I mean, it was cool. They checked, you had to be vaccinated to go into the event last night. And the same thing with today. You have to show your Vax card and your ID. And masking was optional. And I kind of played it like I play it at Whole Foods. Like
Mm.
I'm vaccinated. If I go someplace and no one's wearing a mask, I don't put a mask on. If
Yeah.
some people are wearing a mask, I'll probably put it on at least part of the way. And last night it was predominantly masked. So I kind of had it on, then I took it off, and I kind of had it on. So I mean, I like read the room, and I see what the deal is, and I just kind of follow
Yeah.
along.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. I'll do the same. Like it's like we have still these rules. Like if you go, like I've been to cinema and like I told you, I saw Dune, and you have to like if you're in line, you have to wear a mask, and when you get like your snacks or something. But when you're seated at your place, like you can take the mask off, and they have two seats apart. Like they're always like reserved that you can't book them, so you're not sitting like next to strangers and I feel good with that. I mean, you have to show also proof of vaccination or tests, so or if you like recovered. But like I think the system is working, and I do the same thing when I see like everybody's wearing a mask. I'll keep my mask on too. But like yesterday at that show, I mean, the Dutch. I've been to a show in the Netherlands in summer, and they already there they didn't wear masks, but like I kept my mask on because I just felt kind of weird.
Yeah.
But yesterday I was like, yo, so like they check it and then it should be good, and I feel more comfortable like going out, and like I'm not a party dude, but like going to a show and not wearing a mask indoors. Yeah, like you said, like if I have to, like if I feel like the mask is in place, I'll wear my mask proudly.
Yeah, I thought about wearing my Kid Rock shirt last night with an American flag hat and being like, "Fuck you
What?
guys, I'm not wearing a mask. Fuck you. I'm not going to show you my vaccination card." Like, I thought about doing that, but I felt that might have been too extreme. You know what I'm saying?
Well, dude, you're an American. It's your right. You could also carry the gun,
Yeah. Oh,
shoot
actually,
someone.
yeah, that's right. I was going to carry a sidearm with me though while I went in, but I thought
Yeah.
that might have been too much for everyone.
Yeah, but like when's your like Mike Hill's guide to being a cis white toxic male NSBM this like disputable horror movie enthusiast guideline book, is that out sometime
Well,
soon?
I actually have been accused of being a toxic male.
Well,
In the recent weeks. And, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I can understand how someone might miscategorize me as that. So, you know,
well,
I let that shit roll off me, man. It's all good.
but we all know that you're a difficult person to work with, So like just fits very well.
Real quick, you mentioned Nijmegen in the Netherlands. And
Yes,
I
correct.
believe that's where I discovered the Dutch phenomenon of Zwart Piet in in Europe one year.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, it's a weird thing, man. But Dutch people are weird people. I love them. They're super nice, but they're weird people.
Yeah, they have their peculiar ideas at times.
Yeah, but like their venues are so badass. So like this Nijmegen venue that we played, there's a festival called Soul Crusher Festival, and we played the release show for Inextricable Wandering there at the festival in 2019. And the same evening, Def Heaven played as a headliner, and they were on the road with Into Armour, and like they're friends of ours and friends of yours too. And like they had like this,
Inter Arma are friends of mine, not Def. Just to let you guys,
yeah.
just to keep that straight. You know what I mean?
Wow. Okay. Sorry for getting this mixed up. Uh, I mean, we've both played Whole Road Burn, and we know what kind of an operation the 013 venue is.
Yeah.
But like, there's something yesterday. Like, I've seen it before. It's just astounding. Like, so they have this hangar where you can drive in. I mean, we just had like a Ford Transit van, so it's like easy. But like, you can go in there with like a tour bus, load out, and they have this crane picking you up, flipping you in the air, turning the van around so you can drive out without like putting the rear in. It's so crazy to build something like this, where just like a full-on tour bus gets lifted up, turned 130 degrees, and then gets set back down, so you can just drive out straight ahead. It's so crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, Roadburn's a lot of fun, man. I someday I would like to go there just as a spectator, as an audience member and hang out and check it and just do the whole thing without worrying about playing or doing press or anything like that.
Dude, like from what I heard yesterday, there was like a friend of mine who runs a label, and he's good friends with Walter. And from what I heard, Roadburn next year is happening, and Ultha will go on tour the week after Roadburn. So maybe we could come around, we go to Roadburn, and then you tag along for 2 or 3 shows on that Ultha tour or something like that.
That might be awesome. That's, what I haven't, it's funny, man. I like that idea. And the idea of traveling until very recently, it's been this like weird illusion, of like, I want to do this, but how, like, should I make plans? I don't know, because like we made plans to tour in the States here in November, and that got canceled or postponed rather. Yeah. And so now I mean, yeah, people fly now, so fuck it. I should just do this, man.
It's also like, sorry.
Who's playing Roadburn next year?
Oh, it hasn't been announced yet. So like it's weird, but I think Walter is playing it safe. So from what I understand, like he's booking all these bands, and like if it's safe to say like Roadburn will actually happen, then I guess he will post it. Otherwise, he will just like not.
Oh, right.
Because last year they had this streaming event they did, or this year. And I think like it looks like it's possible next year to have it like in an almost full capacity. But knowing Walter a bit, it's like I guess he's playing it safe and like waiting to the last minute to announce it. So I'm curious who will play. But like with Roadburn, it's like I mean there will be at least like 3 bands every day that are like at least enjoyable, and like some bands that you just see and think like wow that's awesome. And I guess like if he comes, like if Roadburn, if Becky and Walter, like they're coming back and they decide to do it, I think they will go like full on and it will be a great lineup, I guess.
Yeah, I need to do stuff like that, man. And, playing it was a pleasure, man. It was so cool playing that. We did it twice, man, and it was fucking great, man. And I'd love to go back and do that again, but I also would love to go and just take it in as an audience member and just not have all that stress of doing these festivals on me either,
Yeah, right. And I mean, let's see. Well, maybe we can work it out and you'll come here and we'll do it.
Well, I think I made this statement that once things return to normal, that I was going to just, do everything instead of finding reasons not to do stuff, which was like my sort of pre-pandemic lifestyle where it's like, well, I'm too busy. I can't do this. I'm tired. I can't go out to this show or whatever. It's like, hey man, I'm putting a plan together and I'm going to fucking execute it. And that's going to be the way I'm going to live my life from now on. So there you go.
Right. And also like same here. From what I heard, Biden is lifting the travel bans for Europeans. So I don't know if it's like October or November, but I think it's close by that I could actually like enter a plane and fly out to the States. And like once this is actually confirmed, we will talk about me visiting you in New Jersey.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, Newark Airport's a half an hour away. I live like a human being, unlike how I used to live in Brooklyn. And I have space, I have everything's close by, which is nice,
All right, we'll make it happen, dude. I'm so looking forward to hanging out with you in real life again. It's been, I don't know, like we talked about it, 5 years, 6 years?
I don't even want to, it makes me depressed to think about that. Yeah. I don't want to think about, I want to think about the future, man. That's what I want to take in now.
Yeah. So like if we want to, like we talk about the future, let's talk about past music, which is still the future of rock music.
Yeah, man. Yeah, today's episode is actually pretty fucking cool, man. I'm glad you came up with this idea. And I was like, man, what a great idea. Because Minneapolis used to be at one point in musical the history of alternative music, for lack of a better term, was kind of like a center, similar to the way Seattle was and Chicago and all that sort of stuff. But it oftentimes gets overlooked.
Yeah, it's like the predecessor to all that happens in Seattle, because these guys were there before that, and they, like you said, they paved the way for all this thing called alternative rock. Yeah.
Well, there's a direct line between the two bands I think we're going to focus on. There's a direct line between them and Nirvana, if you ask me.
Yeah, and also like the cool thing is, because I want to talk about like where did we find out about these bands, heard them the first time. There's a direct line from like where I first heard the one band, and also connection to you and me, because the one band I discovered on that American tour that Planks and Tombs did together.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But let me ask you something before we start, because I have never been in Minneapolis. And I mean, I came up with this idea because I read that book about those bands.
Yep.
Can you I mean, there's a bunch of people from Europe listening, and like from Germany, friends of mine. And I assume Minneapolis is not the city that like typical German tourists go to when they fly to the States. And I'm sure you've been there or you played there. What's Minneapolis like? What do I have to like? What is it? Is it like Chicago? Is it dangerous? Is it like a regular city? Or
all right, you want to know about Minneapolis? I'll tell you about Minneapolis. Okay, all right. I going with the theme of heartbreak that we started out like earlier on. One of the loves of my life when I was a young man, I met in college, and she was from Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and those two cities are like so close. It's almost like how in New York there's like boroughs. Minneapolis and St. Paul are like right next to each other. They're basically one big city, And my first experience with Minneapolis was, once things were getting serious with this lady, I flew out there to meet her parents. Okay. It's the summertime, and it's like very, let's say, Midwestern. It's I wouldn't say it's dangerous. It's a fairly like it's kind of boring, I guess, for lack of a better term. There's like these like suburban kind of industrial places, I guess that's like a lot of the landscape, and then there's like a downtown area where like nothing goes on the weekends and at night. It's all businesses, and going down through this area, one of the things I thought was interesting is that there's these overhead passageways that connect a lot of the city, a lot of the buildings. So I'm like, oh, what's this all about? And I mean, I was only like 19 at the time, and wasn't very worldly, not like I am now. I wasn't a world traveler like I am now. And so she says, she's like, oh, it gets really cold out here in the wintertime, with this like Midwestern accent, And I'm like, it gets cold. So anyway, that was my first experience there. We went to this summer festival, like some kind of like dairy is really big. A lot of the people, a lot of the Europeans that settled that area were Scandinavians, so everyone has this kind of Scandinavian, like blonde, blue-eyed, block-headed, big people, like white people kind of look, And dairy's really big. I remember dairy and farm equipment being huge at this festival. Milk, cheese, like all this stuff. So that was my first time there. And then, of course, a few years after that, when I descended into the punk rock, hardcore metal world, I was on tour, and we played in Minneapolis, and it was it kind of reminded me of like a Chicago like vibe a little bit, And any of you guys out there who live in these cities, you probably think I'm completely off base, but these are my impressions, I mean. This is my impression of the place, like Midwestern city, kind of like working class, like as opposed to like a coastal city like New York or LA, where there's industry being different, like in like say New York, the industries that push that city forward are more abstract, like finance and advertising and shit like that. And I think like in the Midwest, the kind of industry that pushes things forward is more tactile, like manufacturing and, that kind of thing, engineering, like stuff like that. So, yeah, that's my impression of the city. I can imagine being very bored there all the time. Of course, there are venues. There's like the famous 7th Street entry, which these Husker Du and the Replacements played at places like that. Prince obviously is from Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my impressions of the place.
Dude, but that's cool. Like, because it's, the idea for this podcast came when I read Trouble Boys,
Yeah.
the biography of the Replacements, which is, to be honest, one of the best musical biographies I've ever read. I'm sure you have read it too.
Oh, I'm looking at it right now as we speak. I see it on my bookshelf.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just such a weird story, and there's like this band was born from boredom and like having nothing to do in a shit town with not many options. And that's what I like read about Husker Du as well. And it's funny, you mentioned like Minneapolis and St. Paul being like the boroughs in New York, and we've got the Replacements from Minneapolis, and we got Husker Du from St. Paul. And oddly enough, the name Husker Du is like a Danish Norwegian term for "Do you remember?" which is again Scandinavian, which fits the St. Paul vibe. Yeah, so it's all connected. So thanks for the introduction to that city, Mike.
Yeah, and also let's not forget that in the '90s, one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most influential underground record labels emerged from Minneapolis, and that's Amphetamine Reptile.
Correct.
Tom Hazelmeyer kind of really put a spike into extreme music, I guess, for lack of a better term. Like he really made a standard for what could be possible with guy. I always thought it was like guys who were too old to be punks, or something like that, like they kind of grew out of like punk and hardcore and moved into this other realm, like bands like like the Jesus Lizard, and they weren't actually on AMREP, but Unsane, Lubricated Goat, Helmet, the Cows, all those great bands. I think that is also significant about Minneapolis, but we're not going to go into the '90s too much. We're going to stay in the sort of seminal world of the Replacements and Husker Du. Right.
Yeah. So like when I came across this idea, like reading this book, and I think, like, to quote myself, I think the Replacements are the unsung heroes of American rock and roll. And they're like so undervalued and underappreciated, which is like kind of their own fault, because when you read that book, they're the most dysfunctional band ever. But they're so good at what they did, and there's so many great albums and songs. And I mean, Husker Du at least gets the reputation from the alternative scene and also from the emo punk scene. I mean, there would have been a hot water music if it hadn't been for Husker Du. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that 100%. And also Bob Mould. I think his career in some ways eclipsed Paul Westerberg's post Replacements career too.
Yes,
totally. And like he had Sugar, and then he made all these great solo records, and I think that he's more in the conversation of alternative music as being a higher profile, like, agent within that scene.
Yeah. And both these bands, it's funny, like when I thought about like, okay, what do we need to cover like on this podcast about these two bands? It's like they're both were placed within a scene they didn't want to be part of, and they kind of played around that, like with the general like aesthetics musically from that scene, and then completely went away from it and completed something unique of their own. And they're both at some point, I mean, with the Replacement Stink EP and also like the early days of Husker Du, they were clearly like in this hardcore punk realm, and both of them didn't actually want to be in there. But like coming through this, like Husker Du got asked to tour with Black Flag, which made them like meet Greg Ginn and then being signed to SST Records. Yeah.
I think SST at that juncture in the 80s was probably the perfect label for them, just because they, Greg Ginn curated a pretty diverse roster of bands on SST. Like SST wasn't like, like you would never have like Negative Approach on SST. You would never have like the Cro-Mags or something like that on SST.
Yeah.
It would be these weird left of center bands like Black Flag, St. Vitus, the Descendants, Minutemen, and Husker Du, and none of those bands sound anything alike, really.
Yeah, but all these people are like-minded in a way because
Yes.
they're open. They love their music. They know what they're doing, and they're not like stubborn assholes. It's like, this is the only music I want to. And this is what always resonated with me, with especially like with SST, but also with Twin Tone, like that label that the Replacements were on.
Right.
It's just like this. When I like, if you could book your own festival, like if you could say like, okay, I can have like 5 bands that I could just book that are active. I assume you, as much as I, wouldn't book 5 black metal bands back to back.
No, I wouldn't.
And it's also like, if Tombs goes out and you were asked to play a fest, and it would be 5 black metal bands, or it would be like a noise rock band, it would be like, I don't know, like Bambara plays, and I don't know, like a complete like 1349 Tombs, but also like a post-punk band, and I think it would work. And I would rather play a festival like this than like a straight up black metal festival. And it's also, I appreciate labels that dare to have different stuff. And I mean, some labels developed like this. I mean, if you look at the early Revelation catalog or Victory Records, it was pretty much the same, but later it got diversified. But the connection were the people that like were behind the bands, and that's what SST was always for me. And like a band like Husker Du thrived through that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and one of the things about those bands is they brought in diverse elements, into the actual music. And I think, I mean, let's think back to the other contemporary bands that were great, but were very much just like one note, like Minor Threat, Negative Approach. It's like great bands. I love them. Debatably, Minor Threat is the only band Ian MacKaye ever did that I like, actually. And
oh wow,
okay. Yeah, I mean, I like the first Fugazi record, but the feel good vibe of Fugazi and the Discord scene was never my thing, really. Like it just wasn't the world I lived in to be like all like friendly and positive, and we're into like whatever, like kindness and. Like that's never been my thing, man. I do
toxic
anyway.
White man speaking.
Yeah, it's like the caring aspects of the DC scene where like I just never related to that. Anyway, but early on with both bands, they were very, very punk and very extreme, and Husker Du played real like very fast, aggressive, noisy chaos. But as you can tell, they were into other things, and that stuff ended up melding with that music and then becoming a very unique individual style and sound, And with respect to Replacements, I always felt like Paul Westerberg was like a punk rock Charles Bukowski in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like his own worst enemy, alcoholic, dysfunctional, possibly mentally ill, like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I got all that from the Trouble Boys book too,
Yeah,
and
totally.
And it just makes for an interesting story. And the fact that Bob Mould was gay and Grant Hart was gay, and they were playing in this like high testosterone scene, and it just makes the story like really interesting. And then the two contrasts between the band is like Husker Du, very focused, very, just like disciplined with their approach to the music, and Replacements, chaos.
Complete opposite.
Total mess.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
As I said, like I thought about like when I listened to the GGL episode of you and Randy like a couple of weeks back, I was thinking like, I mean, this guy was literally insane, and he put out so much stuff, and the Replacements were kind of like that, and they're like equally as dysfunctional, but like not like through. I mean, of course they threw stuff in the audience, and like at some point probably also excrement stuff, but they're like kind of like the Gigi Allen of like more rock and roll in a way. it's like maybe looking better or something. I don't know, but like they have the same dangerous vibe around them. Like from the like what I read in the book is like one guy said, I think it was Peter Jesperson, like the guy that got the demo and brought them to Twin Tone Records, was a manager for a long time. They said like Replacements was the best band you could see, but or the worst band you could ever see. It depended honestly on like how the day went. So you could see them like 10 times and it could be hit or miss with them. Yeah.
Yeah, and my impressions of Husker Du was that they were always. I mean, obviously bands have bad shows here and there, but they were like consistently awesome live. I mean, I've actually never seen Husker Du, so I can't say that in with any confidence really. But my impressions, at least, and what I've read, is that despite having a bad day, they still would go out and destroy. So that's my feeling about them, at least.
Have you seen the Replacements?
You know what? I did, but it wasn't the lineup with Bob Stinson, though.
Okay, yeah.
It was
he was out. Yeah, with Slim Dunlop.
Yeah, Slim Dunlop. It wasn't even the. It was the tour for the All Shook Down record.
Oh, so right at the end, like around the time where they toured with Tom Petty and messed that up too.
Yeah, it was like they were headlining, and it was like I missed the real version of the band. I was just like, a little bit before my time, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's I've got to say, like if I don't want to like pick sides here, but like I definitely come more from the Replacements angle. Like they're more dearer to my heart than Husker Du are, even though I love Husker Du, and they're like also bands like the Replacement. They released, there was like a remix version of the Don't Tell a Soul record. It's called That Man's Pop, with the actual studio versions they wanted to release, and the label said they didn't, so they had to re-record it. And it's just like way more raw and more punk. And now, like there was for Record Store Day, there was a version of Pleased to Meet Me, also with alternative versions. And I buy shit like this from the Replacements. And there was like for the last Record Store Day last year, there was a live record, a 3 LP live version, and it cost me €50 for a live record. But it was around the time where they were on the Pleased to Meet Me, on the Don't Tell a Soul tour, where they were like an actual pop band, but they play like all the old stuff too. So like it's really fast and aggressive, and all these pop songs have like this dangerous vibe to it. And there's like a live record from the first oh my God, I forgot how this is, but it's like from the second tour, so they did. And they were just such a fucking good live band when they were on point. But then, like in the book, it says like you could like go to a show and they would play like 25 blues medley covers, and that would God, atrocious. I didn't want to see that, man.
I think that I don't. All right, let's put it this way. It's funny to think about it this way. Like I prefer the music of the Replacements to Husker Du. I love both bands, by the way. But I feel like the elements of Husker Du have reached more into my own creative output than the Replacements.
Same here. Totally.
That's not to say I've ever been in a band that sounded like Husker Du, but like there's like certain things that they do, like especially the fast material that they have, and I'm like, in my mind, when I'm writing music, sometimes I'm thinking of that stuff, you know what I mean? Like, and it kind of, maybe the spirit of it enters what I do a little bit more. And the Replacements, 100%, that music does not ever really enter my mind when I'm writing music. But on an emotional level, I respond to their earlier, everything up till Pleased to Meet Me, I think is amazing. Yeah. And it's such a, like, you're like, emotionally devastating lyrics, and it's the kind of music you listen to and you're like sitting in the dark and just laying on the floor and you're like, oh my God, this is like such heartrending like storytelling and all that sort of stuff. And that's what I go to the Replacements for. Or when you meet a girl and you want her to think you're sensitive, and you say, oh yeah, I like Hootenanny by Tim by the Replacements is my favorite record, and you tell some lady that, they think that you're a good guy, and oh, look how sensitive he is. He must be a great listener. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but if you say like Paul Westerberg is Bob Stinson is my spirit animal, then she should probably like pack her stuff and run.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, I think like now with Ropes of Night, I finally have a band where I can like have influences by those bands. And of course we don't sound like Husker Du and we don't sound like the Replacements. But I gotta say, one of the first songs we ever like fucked with in like making it a cover version was my favorite Replacement songs of all time, "The Ledge" from "Pleased to Meet Me," which is also the saddest song, but it has this like four to the floor, like drum beat and the picking guitars, and actually this song was kind of like the one of the songs that I gave to Andy, who recorded the Ropes of Night record, where I said like I want to have these twangy, almost clean guitars, but like cool bass sound, and the bass and the kick are like we're doing like the actual thickness of the production comes from the drums and the bass, and yeah, man, I can't play like these guys. I mean, they were like the kids that didn't have nothing to do. They sat around and played guitar the whole day, and I'm like an okay guitar player. I have my own style. But like trying to play Replacement songs, I would have really to like practice for weeks. And but like the general idea of how these bands work, and both these bands have like what they can do, and it's what I love about this type of music is the harmony aspects of how the guitars and the vocals work together, and that's what I draw from for Ropes of Night now.
That's interesting, man. I actually wouldn't have guessed that, honestly. But it's cool that you mentioned that. And yeah, just a quick aside about the game Husker Du. When I was living in Boston, like back in the '90s, I was wandering around and I went to this mall. Well, actually, it's not much of a mall. It's called the Arsenal Mall. There was like a couple of stores in it. It was kind of a sad, pathetic, like shopping area, I guess, in Watertown. And I went into a Caldor's like department store, and just walking around by myself in this department store, and I ended up in like the games section of the toy department, right? And lo and behold, I saw the Husker Du game.
And cool!
It was like Husker Du, and under it says, "Do you remember?" And I was like, "Wow, that's how that must be where they got their name." That was before I even discovered all this stuff.
That's cool. And it's cool that I still think it's funny that they used like the umlaut dots like above the vowels, above the U's, just as a reference to like that they like metal and Motorhead.
Yeah, totally.
And that's the cool thing about both these bands. I mean, look at the catalog of cover versions that like Replacements did, and also like Husker Du covered stuff, and the bands that actually ended up covering those two bands are like from metal to punk to grunge to pop. And the most insane thing is like that actually Prince was a Replacements fan too. I mean, Paul Westerberg.
I'm not surprised by that. Prince seemed like a guy who just pulled everything in, man. I imagine he probably did like those bands.
Yeah, he actually went to shows. That's what, as I read, like after I read the book, I went through some YouTube videos about the Replacements, and there was one about like also Minneapolis, and then like of course that Paul Westerberg was a fan of Prince, but that actually like they played a show, and it was thankfully a show where they said like we were good tonight because the alcohol and drugs weren't that much we had. And that was the show that Prince came out to see them, like all dressed up in disguise, so like no one would recognize him. And he must have come up to like Paul Westerberg afterwards, like, "Hey man, cool set, love your band," and left. And Paul Westerberg must have been like, "I think that was Prince."
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean he's only like 4 feet tall too, or he was only 4 feet tall. Yeah.
And isn't Prince like just as a side note, isn't Prince like one of the most fascinating like musicians of all time?
I love Prince. Even back when I was a kid, when all his like, Raspberry Beret and
man.
That stuff, it's such a, I mean, I don't care who you are and you hear that song or even Purple Rain, like that anthem.
Yeah.
and you don't get an emotional reaction from that, you're fucking dead inside, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like you might as well just become like a fucking mannequin or something. You know, that's like you can't help but react to his music, and I've always been a big fan of his, and even these like weird, like, you know, like in the last few years, all these like stuff from his vault has starting to be released.
Oh,
Like,
man.
even that stuff's interesting to me, you know.
Dude, like Prince '86, a microphone and a piano. That album that came out 2 years ago or 3 years ago, unbelievable, man. Just demo recordings of him with a piano, unbelievable. And like for me, like more like going back to the classic rock thing. First off, when people ask like who's the greatest musician of all time, and people say Michael Jackson, I want to punch their face, because Michael Jackson is awesome. I like old Michael Jackson stuff, but Quincy Jones wrote that shit. He was good at what he did, but Prince was the real deal. He played every fucking instrument. He completely self-recorded some of these fantastic albums, and he could just go on. He has such a high output. And then, like, as if he isn't the coolest person ever, there's a video of him. Like, I don't know what it was, but it was like an all-star cast on stage with Tom Petty, Ringo Starr, and like a bunch of these rock dudes, and they play Why My Guitar Gently Weeps. It's on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh, wow, I got to see that. I haven't seen it.
Dude, I will send you the link after this, and you will watch it, and you will like be like, okay, amen, brother. It's like they play this song, and there's like all this talent. It's almost like the Traveling Wilburys times 10 with all the person, like even the bongo player is like a gigantic star in the music scene. They play. They're all badass. Tom Petty is singing. And there are like 4 guitar players on stage plus 2 with an acoustic guitar. They all play and then in the end, Prince steps from the side of the stage, comes on in like in a suit with a purple hat on, like plays this Telecaster and plays the most shredding guitar solo I've ever seen. Plays it at some point, turns around, it looks like he lets himself fall into the audience, but there's this like 6'10" gigantic black security dude that just like catches him, pushes him back on stage. He keeps on shredding, like they're all play their stick. He's done. Then he just like tosses the guitar in the air, leaves stage, and the roadie catches the guitar. Everybody's still on stage. Just Prince just leaves. Yeah. It's like he's the coolest of all time.
It's fucking badass, totally badass, man.
Man.
Yeah, I've always, like I said, I've always been a big fan. Like I own most of those early records, and you know, like even like the like before he got very very flamboyant. Like he had that Time record, I think.
Yeah,
that's like great shit, man. That's all good stuff from back then. I can't remember the name of the album that song is on, but yeah, it's all good.
Mike, do you think we would blow the minds of like the audience of Everything Went Black? It's like where we always talk about dark wave and horror movies, all this shit. If we do a Prince episode,
no, I don't think so. You know why, man? Because like I think anyone out there who's been like following like Tombs or any of the stuff I've written out there knows that I love. That's a music that some people would be embarrassed to say they like. As far as like, I'm not embarrassed to say I like Flock of Seagulls and stuff like that, you know. And I think that if people can accept that, they will accept that a Prince episode, which I think we should do. I think that's a great. There you go. That's a great idea.
All right.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you a question. Yeah. So you were saying that. I don't know if I was aware of this, that you were introduced to the Replacements on the tour that we did together.
Correct, man.
Really?
So
at what point did you discover that? I don't recall exactly.
Yeah, okay. So first off, the first time I ever heard anything from that, and I want to hear where you got introduced to these two bands too. The first thing I ever heard from this was the single soundtrack, where there was a song from Paul Westerberg on that. I mean, I got it for like Wood of Alice in Chains, and there was like a Chris Cornell song, also like Pearl Jam songs I like. But it had like this Paul Westerberg song. So that's where I knew the voice from. And I knew like he was in a band called The Replacements. And it's one of these bands that I knew bands that I liked them. Like sort of like when we talked about with buying death metal records, looking at the thanks list and the t-shirts they wore. and you got like more stuff from that, or like the hardcore scene was the same thing. I know that like I love bands that like the replacements. And for example, Green Day, like when I liked Green Day when they came out, like before Dookie, like in '92 with Kerplunk, like Billy Joe Armstrong mentioned in an interview I read that it's like it was like they covered Alex Chilton,
Yeah.
like in one of the first songs, and they later on played it together with Paul Westerberg. And so I knew the name, and then we played that last minute show because remember that tour was booked, Tombs Planks US tour, and then you got asked to do that Enslaved tour, I think.
Oh God,
Which,
yes. Yeah, I remember
yeah,
that whole
and
debacle. Yeah.
yeah, and then I think there was 3 shows that had to be canceled because of the radius thing. You're not
Yeah.
allowed to
Yep.
play in it. And
And then the enslaved
yeah,
tour got canceled.
yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. And one show, which ended up being my like probably one of my favorite evenings of that tour, was we played in Normal, Illinois. We played at Fire Hose Pizza
You guys.
Place. I
Oh my God, man! You always go. You always talk about that show. It's so funny, man. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's like it's the weirdest thing. Like it's like okay, it's like Frank Benny, and you know how Germans like how German or European shows work. You would never play a pizza place.
No.
You have like squats here. You don't have that in the way we have. But like you play like squats, AZs, or like these youth centers or shit like that, or like actual venues. But no, I mean, from America, I know you play basement shows, you play house shows, and you play like we played in like that tour. We played with Bastard Sapling and Triac at this pool hall that Dave Woody set up in Richmond, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then some days later, it's like, okay, so we played a pool hall now, and now we're playing a pizza place. And so at first I thought like, okay, probably they sell pizza during the day, and in the evening it's a venue. No, like we loaded our shit while families were eating pizza that night.
Yeah.
And they were like, what the fuck are these guys doing? It's like, yeah, you can start soundcheck. I'm like, they're like, there's families eating pizza there. You sure? It's like, yeah, okay, go ahead. And then this Italian dude was, oh, you're from Europe. Oh, yes. I love Europeans. And it's like, hey, this guy, like, he's half Italian. And you were like, what? No, wait. And but like this guy gave us free food, and you were like, "Oh, cool, man. We never get food on these shows."
Dude, it's like, man, this is like that was the thing. Like on that tour, that was like halfway between us being like a legitimate band in the United States too, man. Because it was like still those tours are very much just like Anodyne tours for the most part, where it's half of the shows there was like 5 people at them, and then some shows there was 20, and that was cool, when we're playing these random spots like pizza places and basements and pool halls and stuff.
So we arrived at the venue, and it's just like, oh yeah, you have time, like you can load like in an hour or something. And I remember I walked around because I was never Normal, Illinois. I checked it as like a student, like a student city or something, and there was a secondhand record shop. And I went through that, and I think Carson was in there too, and Andrew, and at some point Benny walked in there too. And they're like, okay, this is the vinyl thing. And I'm like, oh, buying vinyl on this tour, like taking it home on a plane is always a mess. And talking to that guy, he's like, oh yeah, we've got a lot of tapes upstairs. I'm like, oh, cool, man, I love tapes. Yeah. So I went upstairs, and they had like this wall full of tapes. Remember, like these old wall of tapes where you can browse through them.
Yeah.
And they ended up having the Don't Tell a Soul tape, and it was like, oh, Replacements. I remember that band, and that's probably because the artwork is black and gray. It looks like a fucking Darkwave record. It's the only Replacement record that actually looks like dark music. The others have like goofy artworks.
For the most part, you're right. I think, yeah. Stink has a very very punk like look to it. The EP, Stink.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like the darkest, definitely. And so like I'm like, cool. What's it like? $4 or $3 it was. I'm like, cool. I'll take that one. And I got like a bunch of other tapes. I got like a Feuds of the Nephilim tape, and I got a Mission tape. I still have them here. I'm looking at them actually right now. And this is like, I still treasure that one tape. And that was like, I went home and put it in my tape deck, And I mean, that's the time when they were already like a pop band.
Yeah.
But something with songs like Anywhere's Better Than Here, just like the name itself, and that's what I felt like most of my life. It's like I don't belong here. It's like I like Anywhere's better than where I'm right now. I mean, even songs like Talent Show, which are like kind of goofy lyrics, but still it caught me, man, and I love this to this day. This is my I'm stuck in traffic and I hate driving right now tape or music. It's like I put on the Don't Tell a Soul and it soothes me. And that was my introduction to the Replacements. And I remember like when we met up at that Fire Hose Pizza, shout out to this place if it's still alive. I don't know. It's like I saw like, dude, like this is my tape hall. And they were like, oh cool man, Fields, Mission, and oh Replacements. I love that band. And it's like, cool. So that's on that tour, I got my first Replacement music ever.
That's of the post Bob Stinson era. That's actually probably their best one, I think. I like that record
Yes.
too. It's got Merry Go Round, and you mentioned Talent Show.
Yeah.
And there's always like a lyric on that one song that haunts me, man, where he's like empty seat in the first row or the front row. And
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck, dude, it's like that's like the seat his girlfriend was supposed to sit in and they broke up and she's not there. You know what I mean? It's like
Yes.
it makes me think of that. And that's like such a successful, powerful piece of writing. You know, it's almost like it's almost Hemingway-esque in the way that he wrote that line. And I've always that line has always resonated me. It's like it's always haunted me all these years about who was supposed to be sitting in that empty seat, you know, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with Bastards of Young about like being in a band and like not only up God, what a mess on the ladder of success, which is like, yeah, that's your biography, man. It's like playing a show in New York where like three major label guys come up and they're announced to show up because they want to sign you and give you like the money you always think you deserve. And you go on piss drunk on speed, like even like more stuff, and you play a shitty karaoke version of like blues covers. What do you expect will happen, man? And it's just like they sabotage themselves. So like, yeah, God, what a mess on the ladder of success. That's for me is like this is the biography. And Trouble Boys. That's also just like such a perfect name. These guys were trouble all the time.
Yeah, you know, and that just goes back to what I was saying about him being like this kind of punk Bukowski, you know, like I would love to, if Westerberg could ever pull it together to write something, you know, like an actual writing, like text, that'd be cool. You know, I'd be interested to hear what that guy would write. But the way I discovered the Replacements was, it was interesting. It was, I was in high school and, you know, I was always in like all the advanced classes, you know, in school, like, you know, advanced placement, chemistry, biology, math, and all that, and English as well. And my whole life, I've always embraced the written word. You know, I've always loved reading. I've always loved writing, and I consider myself to be like this kind of, you know, a good writer, you know, for the most part. So I got to AP English, and this guy, Mr. Trezza, the curriculum had this very rigid sentence structure. You had to follow these rules in writing. And I was like capable of doing those things. But, you know, being, you know, just at that point in my life, I was starting to discover the left-hand path, you know, and I wanted to be a goat, you know, and fucking go against the grain. So I wrote the way I wanted to write. I would write the right way, quote unquote, and I would also write my way. And I ended up being removed from the class. So I was devastated. I fucking hated this guy. I'm like, man, who the fuck do you think you are, man? Like, throw me out of this class, whatever. I'm like, I'm a 4.0 like student, man. You can't do this to me, you know, whatever. So I ended up going into like the regular English class with everyone. And that was my junior year. In my senior year, my locker was right next to Mr. Trez's homeroom class. And, you know, he was an interesting guy. Like, he was an English teacher, but he was way into music. Like, very, very much into contemporary music at the time. And he knew that I played in bands, and he knew that I was into music. And I was like, and it probably bummed him out that he had to, like, give me bad grades because he was probably like, yeah, I know, I got to teach this thing. You know, this kid obviously, you know, doesn't want to follow the rules, so I have no choice, you know. So one day we would talk about music all the time. He would ask me about, oh, you know, what, you know, you're in a band, like, you know, what are you guys doing? Like, what do you guys sound like? I gave him demo, like practice tapes that we made in our basement in my parents' house, and then one day he realized I was getting ready to graduate, and I'd already been accepted to Boston University, and he's like, oh, you know, congratulations, you know, whatever. And then he gave me this cassette tape that had the Replacements' Tim on one side, and the other side was the Del Fuego's Boston Mass record. Okay.
Wow.
Now
that's a good tape.
Yeah, he gave me that. He gave me the thing for the Del Fuegos because he's like, yeah, you know, you're going to Boston. These guys are a local band. They just put this record out. You know, they had like the Don't Run Wild like hit, you know, for them.
Oh.
And it's like, yeah, then if you like them, you'll probably like this other band, the Replacements, right? So I was like, oh, thanks, man. So I'd go home and I'd listen to the Del Fuegos record because they had a video on MTV.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and then I was like, that's pretty cool. You know, maybe I'll see them when I go to Boston. You know, like I go to school up there. But then I listened to the Replacements side, and it hit me hard. Like a ton of bricks, man. I was like, man, this is what it's all about, man. This is like, you know, and at the time I was into like Black Flag, the Ramones, Dead Kennedys, you know, I was in, you know, Slayer and Metallica were part of my listening. And I wasn't really into that kind of stuff per se, you know, it wasn't really like, but that was like, it changed the way I started seeing music, I guess. And I think around that time I started listening to REM as well. Like, you know, Reckoning was the big record. And I think the Smiths' How Soon Is Now video was something I started seeing and being, oh, this is kind of cool, you know. Now, the song Kiss Me on the Bus, okay, that was the big song for me. And it's a funny story. And this is almost like a replacement song. There's a young lady that we were in homeroom together. We had the same last name, okay? I'm going to refrain from presenting her full name, okay? Just in case anyone knows her, and I don't want to embarrass anybody, you know, or you know, she's got probably kids and married and all this other stuff. So anyway, we had the same last name, and that one fact stopped me from embracing this like incredibly intense attraction that we had with each other. And we sat across from next to each other every day in homeroom. She lived like not far from me. And like, we took the bus together. We sat next to each other on the bus all the time. And I was like, I was always inches away from trying to like, you know, start some kind of like youthful relationship with her. And then and that song always reminded me of her because we were on the bus together all the time, going to school in the morning and at night. Well, at night usually I had like wrestling practice, so I wouldn't take the return trip most of the year. And then like yearbook time came around, and she wrote something in my book. And she's like, "Oh, don't read it when you get home or whatever." And I was just like something about how like, you know, she wished that we could have had this. And I'm like, oh my God, man. You know, it's like a replacement song. So,
oh man,
that whole like storyline really connected me to that record, man. And I mean, it's a great record, but it's also a very unusual, has a very peculiar sound to it as well. Don't you think?
Yeah. Like totally.
The production's weird on that record, right?
Yeah, but that was before they really started caring about this or having actually like, good people to work on that. I think it was supposed to be the guy, like the guitar, like Peter Buck. Is that the guitar player of REM?
Yes, right? Peter Buck. Yeah.
I think he was supposed to record it, and then they didn't have their songs together, and they recorded with someone else. Yeah. And I mean, they found their sound later on, whereas Husker Du, they had their like chorusy kind of sound away from the get-go. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Husker were guys who like Yeah, you can tell that they had like a way more focused approach to their music, and like,
Yeah.
they probably had like the amps they wanted, and, the guitars were all set up the
Yeah.
right way. They played in tune every night, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas the replacements didn't give a shit. Whatever's there, they just use it.
Yeah, they probably only one guy probably knew how to tune the guitar. Probably Bob Stinson was the only guy who really knew how to tune his instrument, and he tuned everyone else's shit. And they just went on stage, and that was it. They probably didn't even check their tuning at all.
I mean, I feel like read these stories about their tour days and like having a driver, and then they're like 2 days into the tour, they're already like throwing piss bottles in the van so they explode, and everything is smelly. Just open the window and throw out like a head and something. Is like,
Yeah.
dude, you're on tour, man. So like they're the epiphany of like these sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Like even I mean, mostly they didn't have sex, but they did like the drug thing and the rock and roll thing, destroying hotel rooms, getting sued, getting kicked out of radio stations. I mean, everybody that's like, I don't know, the you guys out there, if you're not familiar with the Replacements, you gotta like find out about the Saturday Night Live story about the Replacements, which is like also so typical for this band. Do you know that story, Mike?
Oh yeah, that's a famous one, man. Yeah, they were banned from Saturday Night Live. You can actually find their performance online, I think, somewhere.
Yeah. It's like being like the replacement again for the Pointer Sisters. In the episode, it was January of '86, where Harry Dean Stanton, of all people, was the host.
That's
what
the
a great episode.
Perfect host for them, definitely.
Totally. And so they got like asked because one of the staff members was a fan of the Replacements, and Lorne Michaels said like, okay, let's have them play. And they did sound check, and they were too loud. And they were told like, okay, keep it down and play these two songs. We want to hear them. They're like, okay, cool. But then, Westerberg said in his biography, he's like, yeah, well, and then there was a fridge full of alcohol, and we had a lot of time. And then they get out, like, Bob Stinson missed the solo in Bastards of Young. And then you could see Bob Stinson saying, Westerberg's like, fuck. And you're not allowed, by that time, like, I mean, you're still not allowed to say fuck, I guess, on Saturday Night Live. But like Lorne Michaels afterwards was pissed and was like, "You're never coming back here." Yeah.
I wonder if they fired the guy who was the fan. I'd be interested to know that.
Probably. Yeah. But yeah, man, like crazy times. And do you think like there's? I mean, I don't know. Like Jay Retard was kind of like maybe one of like a band like this, and he's dead already. But do you think like there are still bands out there like this, like GGL or the Replacements or stuff like this?
I don't know, man. I mean, people care too much about what other people think about them these days. I mean, maybe on some subterranean, like, local scene, there's a bunch of fuck ups who play in a band that are awesome, but they don't. These days, you can't do shit like that and succeed. People will like ostracize you for being like, whatever thing they want to pigeonhole you as these days. You'll become that thing, and that'll be the new thing that like, okay, you're not allowed to be part of this anymore because you guys got drunk and yelled profanities at someone or whatever,
It's also like totally agree. Like that was also when I listened to that Dead Guy episode. Your boy, like what's his name again?
Keith Huckins.
Keith, yeah, Keith. Keith said like when they talked about black metal, I can't listen to like this lo-fi black metal stuff. And then like you guys talked about, it's like it's sheer like you have to really work on your programs right now to make it sound like this. It's not like back then they just had a tape deck to record. Now they record like high quality and they have to make it sound like shit. And I think it's like kind of the same thing. If people right now go out and like, oh, we're going to be a band like the Replacements and blah, blah, blah. Of course they're like, I know a bunch of bands that are like way into drugs and like losing their shit. But like on the level like this, it must be forced nowadays. I don't think like bands like this can still in society today come out and be like this, just like as a natural thing.
Yeah, actually, just speaking to the recording quality aspect of things, it's almost like harder to make a bad sounding recording these days than it is to make an awesome sounding recording, especially with all the tools that are available, like just, online. I mean, I can make a demo. This morning, after we're done, I could record a demo by myself on my computer that sounds like it could be ready to be released as a full length release.
Yeah, sure. And that's like where when I like from sound wise, I gotta say like the replacements, they didn't sell out, but I mean at some point Bob Stinson was kicked out or left, so it's still debatable because like he didn't want to like go the direction that the replacements were going in. But like the influences of Paul Westerberg was clearly not punk rock or rock music. Like he wanted to go into the soul kind of pop music thing more like I guess more in the vein of like also bands like Afghan Wigs, where you have like this indie funky sound in it. Um, but they like the I mean, especially if you listen to Don't Tell a Soul or All Shook Up, they're like really cleanly produced, really tight and but like up until the last record of Husker Du, they always had the chorus and the guitar. It was way distorted. I mean, if you listen to the early stuff, it's like the Landspeed record or like the really old stuff is hard to listen to. But also Zen Arcade still has like this crunchy, or the New Day Rising has like this crunchy, almost too distorted kind of sound to be as pop as they were. And I mean, Candy Apple Gray and Flippy Week, they were more clean, but they were still more rockers than the replacement stuff in the end.
Yeah, I just think that with Westerberg, like he's just one of those guys. Like, was a singer songwriter at heart, and
Yes.
the band was like this vehicle for him to tell his stories. So it was only natural, I think, that as they got more successful and more budget and resources were made available to them to produce their music, that it went in the direction it did. Because I mean, after doing two or three records of just raucous, sloppy punk rock music, I imagine, okay, cool, we've done that. Now we want to do something else. We have all these resources. We have labels, major label money. Why not make it sound good? Have like a better production, like add, there's other instruments on there, like keyboards and horns and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was natural. And with Husker Du, I think their intention was always to make an awesome sounding album. You know what I mean? I like
Yeah.
similar to Black Flag. Like I remember reading recollections of the In My Head record, and Greg Ginn working with Spot and telling him to make it sound like a Dio Black Sabbath album. He's like
Yeah.
they had like Last in Line or something as a being it with the mixes. And he's like, yeah, I want it to sound like this fucking heavy metal album. And it's like, yeah, because he was a guy who operated in the punk scene, but wanted like the best quality available. And I feel like Husker Du were of that mindset, that they just were limited by whatever resources they had available to them. And as time went on, and they had their major label things going on too, that they were able to work in better studios with better engineers with better equipment, and it just made sense for them to. That's the one thing I never really liked about the punk attitude, where it's like, they fall in love with this aesthetic, but yeah, you might like that, and that might be cool. And I'm the same way. I like listening to like raw, brutal recordings, but also it's like, man, like if as a musician, it's like I always want stuff to sound great, and I never want it to be like, yeah, this sounds like I recorded it in like a hallway somewhere. I never want that unless it's just a demo or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and to this day, Bob Mould released Blue Hearts last year. It's a great record, and he's still got it, and he's still got his sound aesthetics. He can still write lyrics. Paul Westerberg, he became quite silent. I would be cool to hear new stuff from him. But yeah, both bands, I think we covered like most grounds before we talk about their underwear or something. We should maybe just like finishing it up with our favorite songs. Should we do that?
Actually, one thing, how did you find Husker Du? We talked about how you
Oh,
discovered
okay.
Replacements. So how did you find
All
Husker
right.
Du?
Classic way, like how I discovered a lot of bands was because a band that I like covered them.
Ah,
And there's this band Therapy from Ireland who were like kind of indie darlings in this alternative rock kind of thing, 93, 94. They had this record Troublegum, which was a big success. And on Troublegum, they covered Isolation by Joy Division. So I found out about Joy Division through them. And on the next record, they had like their hit was a cover version of Diane
oh wow, okay.
in this really Nick Cave kind of murder ballads kind of way. So with strings and like this deep voice and like this chorus repeating like Diane. And I was blown away by that song. And then it said like in the credits, it's a cover by that band Husker Du. And back then, I still lived in Heppenheim, like with this small town, 25,000 souls were living there, and they had like this music garage, it was called, selling secondhand CDs and vinyl. And so I dug through like the punk rock bin, and at some point I found the Zen Arcade CD, and I bought that, and I was confused because like the first few songs are so straightforward and great, and then it becomes trippy and noisy just to get back in the fold later on. But later I found out it was a concept record, but the sound, I just loved it. And like to this day, I think like with something I learned today as an opener, this is kind of my favorite Husker Du moments. That's why I got to meet them. How about you?
As I mentioned earlier, like when I was in high school, I was doing my metal, thrash, hardcore punk thing, and I was also at the same time towards my senior year, I was discovering like the Smiths, and and I had a girlfriend at that point that was into like goth and all that, so I was discovering The Cure and Joy Division and Bauhaus and all that, and then also that's through like an interview I heard with Michael Stipe of all people. I was on USA Night Flight. He was talking about American music, right? And he was typical '80s Michael Stipe with like the long hair. He was talking, but he wasn't looking at the camera. He was like looking off to the left somewhere, and he mentioned all these bands, and he mentioned the Minutemen and Husker Du, right?
Oh yeah.
And I was like, Husker Du, okay. I remember seeing that name in the SST catalog, and guys, back in the '80s, I couldn't just go to my computer and type in Husker Du and have it like their entire catalog pop up. I had to actually find a record, somewhere, or order it, or mail order it, or something like that. So I'm like, Husker Du. So that name stuck in my head. And then on that same show with the interview with Stipe, they played the video for "Don't Want to Know If You're Lonely," right?
Oh, cool.
And I was like, man, that's a fucking cool song. It's got this like distorted guitar. It's like kind of fast. It's got this cool like vocal thing going on. So that was the night that I left, my last night living with my parents. The next day, they drove me to Boston to start my freshman year of college. So,
cool.
I go to Boston. I talked to my RA, like my resident assistant or whatever. I'm on the floor I was living in the dorm, and I'm like, so where the cool kids go, man? Like, where's all the punks? Where's the cool stuff for like cool kids? Like record stores. Where's all that shit? So she's like, yeah, let's go here, go there. Or you could take the train and go, like 10 minutes up, and you go to this other area, and they have other stuff there. So I remember going to this place called In Your Ear, which is a record store on Commonwealth Avenue, and I don't know if it's there anymore, honestly. And I went in there. They had like Live Undead by Slayer. They had the Sam Hain records. And then I saw they had the Husker Du section, and I bought Zen Arcade, which I'm like, this is the one everyone's talking about, man. So let me check this out. So I remember I'm pretty sure I got I forgot which Sam Hain record it was, but I got a Sam Hain record, and I got Husker Du Zen Arcade. And then I went back to my dorm room and listened to both of the records. And my roommate was a total square, so he went out somewhere else to, I don't know, like fucking whatever, row a boat or something on the Charles River or whatever the hell guys do. You know what I mean? So, and that was like the beginning of my like, deep appreciation of Husker Du, because, like I like punk, hardcore, metal, but I also like when stuff goes into this like weird experimental phase, even at that young age, because before I listened to like hardcore and punk, I was way into like, King Crimson and Yes and, Jethro Tull and all this stuff, which was for classic rock, that music was pretty experimental and progressive. So when I saw that stuff emerging inside of like hardcore, I was like, man, this is like, exactly the kind of stuff that I'm into. There's like these trippy parts. There's, Beyond the Threshold is on that record, which is like a raging fucking song. And it
Yeah.
kind of had a full spectrum. And ever since then, I think I've been all in with Husker Du and that Zen Arcade and New Day Rising are probably my two favorite albums by them.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. Man, two cool bands. Really cool bands.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, if you want to, we can run through some of our favorite tracks. We'll put these on our playlist, man.
Yes. Yeah. It's like so. What should we do first? Husker Du, because we just talked.
Yeah,
about
we'll do Husker first, man.
So, what are your favorites?
Well, I got a pretty good list here. I got Everything Falls Apart. This is actually in chronological order, more or less. In a Free Land, Statues, Do You Remember, Beyond the Threshold, which is a song that that's I was listening. Actually, it's funny. I wrecked my car when I moved to Boston. I was not getting very much sleep because I was starting a band, and I was working at some ungodly hour, and I had the beats, and I had a car accident, and I was listening to this song when I was actually in the middle of the accident, Beyond the Threshold.
Oh wow! Okay.
And so anyway, that's funny. I'll Never Forget You, which Anodyne covered.
You did?
Yeah. It's on that discography that I put out years ago.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was on a demo, our first demo. So I could send you that stuff. Actually, I don't sing this song. Ale sang that song. Originally, I did very little singing in Anodyne.
Okay.
The Biggest Lie, Somewhere, The Girl Who Lives on Heaven Hill, Celebrated Summer, incredible song, 59 Times the Pain, Makes No Sense at All, Don't Want to Know If You're Lonely, classic.
Yes.
And Sorry Somehow.
Well, yeah, got the same stuff covered here. Got,
that's funny.
Of course. Oddly enough, like 59 Times the Pain is also a Swedish hardcore band named after that song.
Yes.
Like from that realm of Refused and Breach and all these bands. And one of my favorite songs is Pink Turns to Blue, which is also like a German death rock band, like goth band. I always wanted to tell you about. Like,
I know about them actually.
Yeah. So like Pink Turns Blue. My favorite song will always be Girl Who Lives on Heaven Hill.
Yeah.
Something I learned today, like, of course, and Don't Want to Know If You're Lonely is like the hit. And I got a real soft spot for Sorry Somehow. It's just like this chorus is just so good. Yeah, it's like mostly like the same, like the list you have, all my songs are in there and a bunch more. It's like, yeah, I like spec that.
Don't Want to Know If You're Lonely is probably I would say probably their most high profile famous song. I think most people know that song by them.
Yeah, it is definitely, most definitely. Yeah. All right, let's see for the replacements. Should I start this time?
Yeah, you do it this time. We probably got the same tracks anyway, so go ahead.
I would assume the same. Yeah. Favorite song of all time, The Ledge. It's their saddest song, and I'm like an emo wimp, so like I go for the sad songs. Unsatisfied. It's just like this. Okay, so you write a song with just like one sentence as a lyric, and it's still the saddest song you can write. Bastards of Young, Answering Machine. What a story! Like tell your loved one on an answering machine that you missed them. Here Comes the Regular. Anywhere's better than here. My life motto. And Talent Show. And I gotta say, I love the cover version of Kiss's Black Diamond.
Oh, hell yeah, awesome. Man. That's sick. Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, that would be like my small list. I could go on, but I keep it slim.
Mine's not so slim. So,
all right.
Yeah, so Go off of Stink.
Yes.
That's like the beginning, really. If you think about like, that song was like a precursor to what was to come later in the band's career, I think.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Color Me Impressed off of Hootenanny. I always thought that was like a very clever song, you know.
Yeah.
And in Heather's, you know, there's a lot of references to the Replacements. You know, the fine film featuring the you know, the sublime Winona Ryder. You know, I think guys
Yes.
my age bracket, she's like a heartthrob. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and you know they say "Color Me Impressed" in that movie. So, okay, Within Your Reach off of Hootenanny, and also referencing "Say Anything," which is another great '80s film. You know,
Yeah.
I Will Dare off of Let It Be. You cover Unsatisfied. 16 Blue, great song. Another Let It Be. Hold My Life off of Tim. Of course, Kiss Me on the Bus. Shout out to my unrequited love to my 12th grade not sweetheart, but hey, we were ships traveling through the night. Bastards of Young, which you covered, and Left of the Dial.
Oh yeah.
And there's that line, read about your band in some local page, didn't mention your name. I always thought that was like, I don't know. It's like, I always thought that line had such a heaviness to it. Like, oh yeah, they didn't say anything about you. They talked about your band, but they didn't say anything about you,
Yeah. And isn't it like Replacements is like the band for touring guys like us?
Yeah.
Like grinding and never gaining like actual, like, of course we are successful in this small realm, but like grinding and still in the end, it doesn't matter for some people.
Totally. It's like, I thought about a point in my distant past where there was like a bank teller back when you had to deal with people on face to face that I used to flirt with all the time. And like I told her I was in a band and it was like, I would see her all the time because I had to cash my check every week, and it was like, oh yeah, if I read about your band, but they didn't say anything about you. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, it was weird, random story. Little Mascara off of Tim. And I always thought this was, once again, hearkening back to high school. There's a line, all you ever wanted was someone mom would be scared of, right?
Yeah.
Now, my girlfriend in high school, her parents were terrified of me because I was some weirdo with like funny hair and like all black clothes and into fucking darkness and evil and stuff like that, Alex Chilton, of course.
Yes.
That's one of your songs you like too. Valentine.
Yes, right.
Valentine also off of Pleased to Meet Me. And they have that one infectious line on that song. If you were a pill, I'd take a handful at my will and knock you back with something sweet and strong. So fucking heavy, man. And just like I said, a Bukowski-esque line in some ways.
Yeah.
And it's just that touches on just that obsessively, almost self-destructive nature of love. You know what I mean? And that line always stuck with me. So yeah, that's my list.
Good one. Man, you got like this. All my songs are in there pretty much, and way more. It's like, I mean, they've got, both bands have such a fucking great catalog. There's like almost no stinkers in there. I mean, I never go for the goofy ones like Gary's Got a Boner or something.
Yeah.
But they can, but they own it, man. It's just like some bands, they try to be like cheeky and funny in between like serious songs. It's just whack. But like listening to a Replacement song, it's like ironically funny, especially if you know the backstory of them, like being fuck all this music business shit. Like we do whatever we want. And it's like they said themselves, like they're the best and the worst band at the same time live. And I appreciate this. I can listen to it and don't have to skip it. Yeah.
I think it's funny that they actually included Black Diamond on a legitimate like LP release. You know what I mean?
Incredible, man. Yeah, totally. So out there.
That actually is one of my favorite Kiss songs too, by the way.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Kiss has that big catalog. I'm not a huge Kiss fan, but like next to maybe God of Thunder, like I think Black Diamond is one of the classic rock songs in a way.
Kiss, like if you grew up in like New York, New Jersey, area like I did, you kind of
Yeah,
there's certain bands you have to like, I guess, and Kiss is one of
yeah,
them, and
yeah.
Twisted Sister would be the other band that
Mm,
you just Twisted Sister is, especially if you didn't grow up in New York City, like if you grew up in the suburbs like me, like
yeah,
Twisted Sister were like heroes almost to us growing up
yeah.
in the late '80s and 90s and stuff like that. So
Because you weren't going to take it, right?
I was not going to take it. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
But just to let you know, man, they have like they actually were kind of like these underground heroes, and they have like a bunch of stuff that came out that before they were on a major label, like demos and like
yeah,
independent releases. That's actually pretty good. It's like really good music. I'll listen to it to this day and be like,
yeah.
it's awesome. It's really good stuff.
But dude, it's also like these kind of bands are like they're typical touring bands for me. Like on tour listening, but if someone puts on like a Wasp record or a Twisted Sister, it's like always like kind of cringy, but then it's like it's enjoyable. It's just cool fucking rock songs,
Yeah.
and you can like it's just enjoyable to everybody. I mean, like our drummer, like when he drives, there's always going to be like I don't know, discordance, axis, ASIC, stuff like this, and we're like, oh, dude, like we're on a metal tour and we're playing with metal bands, and now you have to play this stuff. It's like for a while, but like this is like the stuff like like Replacements is always great in a touring band, and it's always like bands like Twisted Sister and also like especially Kiss. Like no one is offended. It's easy to digest, and it's just cool to like tag along. Yeah.
Well, I unironically like Wasp's first couple records, so you don't have to sell me
I
a
know that.
Wasp. And it just
No, I,
it's funny because we were like on tour in the South somewhere, and it was after the show, and our bass player knew this dude that we were gonna stay with. He's like, oh yeah, we have a clean place to stay. You guys don't have to get a hotel tonight. I'm like, cool. So we went to this like a bar, restaurant, pub kind of place afterwards to get some food and whatever after the show. And Animal comes on by Wasp.
oh man.
And I'm like, fuck yeah, this is great, man. And the dude's like, oh yeah, this is really funny. And I'm like, I was like, I got so offended by that. I'm like, what do you mean? I like this fucking song, man. That's not funny. But it actually is kind of funny though. That's the thing. It's like this weird circular logic where it wasn't funny to me, but the song actually is kind of funny. If you think about it, the lyrics in that song are ludicrous.
And to go back to the ongoing topic we always have, do you think this song could be released nowadays without repercussions?
Unfortunately, I think it cannot be released these days without them being like fucking crucified by someone, and that's sad to me.
Yeah,
But then
they would
again,
like have
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
like maybe they would like release a song. I want to have consensual sex after talking about it like two adults. That would be the song today.
That would be the new song. But you know what's funny though? Even despite all of this like political correctness taken to the nth extremity, Terrifier 2 is going to be released this year. The horror film. Have you seen Terrifier?
No, I
Oh
didn't.
man,
But,
dude. It's
okay.
I if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. If you're into extreme nihilistic horror,
Okay.
check it out. It's like Art the Clown is in it. He's like the slasher character. It's like
Yeah, okay.
a totally brutal, no holds barred, like exploration of violence in a
Okay.
modern slasher setting, and it features a character, Art the Clown, and it's a fucking brutal, terrifying movie. And
So almost like, sorry.
yeah,
No.
and there's some very, very, very politically upsetting content in the film too. That someone who is who's very far into caring about what other people think and virtue signaling and triggers and all this stuff is going to be very, very appalled by this movie. So
Okay. So
yeah.
I have to watch that now.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a real bad joke. Like if it is halfway as brutal and deep and dark as Malignant. So
No, that I know how everyone knows how I feel about that movie. So that was garbage. I thought. So the sequel's coming out this fall, I believe, man. I think any week now, Terrifier 2 is coming out, and I think I told you I went to a bunch of horror conventions over the last few weeks,
yes,
and dude, they have the bit. They're the stars, man. They have the longest lines for signings. People are embracing it. So I think that's like a good sign that people aren't afraid of dark
yeah,
stuff, and then to go into like
cool.
these recesses, So that's good.
That's nice. Cool. I will check that one out. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know. So that's it, man. That was an epic, I think,
Yeah. I wonder if if it was, except for maybe Brandon Legions, if anyone is still listening by this time.
Well, if you got a really long drive, I think this will help you get through it. But yeah.
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 Yeah. Shout out to Brandon.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah.
Let me close this off with I think something you don't know, like which is like a funny thing. It's like it ties so much into my life, and I just found it out about this last week doing research. Did you know that Bob Mould in the 90s was a writer for WCW wrestling?
Oh my God, dude. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was actually,
Wow.
man. He's a writer. He wrote for TV, and for a brief stint for like 3 years, he's a pro wrestling fan. And like in the heyday of like WCW when they were competing with WWF, he was actually a writer for TNT, for Ted Turner, for the WCW program. And he's a big pro wrestling fan.
I would have
It's
never
like
guessed
so,
that, man. I would have never
dude,
guessed.
never. But it's so fucking makes him even more likable. But I think he's really one of like interviews with him. He seems to be a really nice person. Yeah.
Always been a big fan of his. I liked, I listened to all of his material. He had that solo album, Black Sheets of Rain, which was awesome. He had the, the stuff he did with Sugar was great. I'm a big Bob Mould fan. And real quick about wrestling. Thanks for recommending that podcast to me with CM Punk. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, cool episode, right? He also seems like to be a like straightforward, cool dude.
Yeah, definitely. Now that Heels thing, what is that? Is that a movie or a TV show or like some Netflix?
That's a
thing?
show. It's a show on Stars, and
Okay.
it has that guy that played Arrow, I think, and he's the main character, and it's pretty much like Friday Night Lights, but set in like a rural town about like a regional wrestling thing. And it's about like it's not David Arquette, it's David something. Dave Schwimmer is also not David Schwimmer, but like that guy that played Arrow, he's like the main guy and he's the writer, and he and his brother are like the stars in that scene. And their father was the star before them, but he committed suicide and left them like broken.
Oh wow.
And then they try to get by, and CM Punk was hired, like he was cast as the main figure first, but then the like stars dropped the idea of that show, and then they got it back and got like this guy like to play the main character, but they asked CM Punk to be like Rick Rabies, like an old retired wrestler, kind of like the wrestler with Mickey Rourke.
Yeah.
Like who and because of his knowledge, and he's like in that show and he's doing a great job. And now they also have Mick Foley, who's like a wrestling legend, and it's cool, man. It's like there's like 6 episodes out, and it's like a drama. If you've been to like these rural parts of America, I'm sure you were, and I mean we played like this Popeye store like in uptown New York somewhere, kind of that vibe, like rednecks going to a wrestling show and barbecuing outside on the parking lot and shit like this. But it's got a really gritty, dark vibe to it, really moody, and I enjoy it a whole lot. And yeah, man, CM Punk's like doing a good job acting. Yeah.
Well, I put that on my list of things to look into, and I wasn't sure if it was a movie or a show. So you cleared that up for me now, so I'm gonna go check it out.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, it's the other. Well, just real. I'm sorry, but like anyone out there, you guys can check out if you want. But it's like about the wrestling stuff. I was fascinated by all the different styles that they talked about, like Japanese style, and I think he said like is there a Memphis style or something like that, or
Yeah.
And I really didn't know about any of that stuff, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and it's that's what I always thought. Like, I mean, people mostly see it as like, oh, it's goofy, it's fake and blah. And that's what he talked about too. Is like some people will like punch you in the face for that. Like, and I mean, it's people know WWF from the '80s and like WWE now, and like goofy characters like John Cena. And yes, there were like testosterone guys like in like swimsuits or like in swim trunks and like oiling themselves up and throwing themselves around. But people like this backyard wrestling, there's like these death matches where they're barbed wire like in barbed wire cages and punching themselves with glass bulbs and shit like this. So it's brutal stuff. And like the Memphis wrestling was really gritty and really hard hitting. So it's not like, okay, so you will slap me, then I will slap you, then I'll put you like in a lock, and then you will throw me in the ring. They were just like going at it. And I mean, it was clear who's going to win. These are the three moves that have to happen. And there's a storyline, but it was rough, man. And yeah, so and CM Punk is a total fan of the whole business. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like not for any reason or no bias or anything like that. I just never got into that style of wrestling. Really, you know what I mean? I just
Yeah.
was never into it. But I am. It's interesting to me, and I think this show Heels is going to be pretty cool. It's going to be like a good thing for me to check out.
Yeah, I think so. It's like it's easy to digest, but it's cool. It's well done. It's good writing, and it's cool the filming is also cool. I don't think it will be more than one season. To be honest, it might be, but it's cool for what it is. And I guess like especially if you're like, okay, I want to know a bit about this, like how they proceed in this downtown wrestling things. I guess you will like it. Yeah.
Right on, man. I'm going to check it out this weekend probably.
All right. Cool.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you're still there, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care.